Welcome to Things You Don't Know, the podcast that sometimes deals and dives headfirst into the stories history books barely whisper about. I'm Dr. Weaver here today with my wonderful compatriot, Dr. Sean Deneen. And today, we're not just peeling back the curtain, we're walking straight into the shadows. The year is 1947. The war's over. Truman's in the White House, and the Cold War is sharpening its knives. But while America tries to breathe again, Attorney General Tom Clark calls on a man who never sleeps, a man whose idea of security is a locked file cabinet and a loaded .38 revolver.
J. Edgar Hoover. Say what you will about his methods, his ego, even his possible cross-dressing. He believed the enemy was always inside the house. And that's where our story begins. Hoover needed enforcers, not the well-dressed agents, men who could work the angles, bend the law without breaking it, and when no longer needed, vanish into the smoke.
Indeed. Enter Michael Millkin, Jewish, Brooklyn raised, fought in Italy, OSS trained, good with a knife, better with a lead pipe. Millkin was a debt collector for the prime minister of the underworld, Frank Costello. His family knew how to make, quote, problems go away back when Luciano was still shining shoes.
After he killed a man while in the lockup, Hoover called him in for a meeting. No record, no file, just one directive: build a team, off the books, a secret 12 made up of mafia men with grudges, spooks with no retirement plans, disavowed agents and political operatives. One man, it was said, once interrogated Reich Marshal Goering's cousin with nothing but a spoon and a bottle of rum.
Over the next 2 decades, the unknowns, as Hoover called them in private, moved across the country like whispers. And what was their mission? Hunt enemies of America, those no jury would convict due to lack of concrete evidence, and no public would believe existed even.
Let's break it down. The unknown's first target was in Georgia in 1955. A Klan rally turned into a recruitment drive for former SS men hiding as American refugees. The 12 burned their records, beat a few people up, and then turned the exalted Cyclops of the Klan after catching him in a house of ill repute with an African American dominatrix. No fingerprints, no message. They were paid in unmarked bills left in the men's room, but the Klan chapter was dissolved in 3 months.
You know, Dr. Deneen, some of this stuff just sounds like hard to believe. But you personally have verified all this, have you not?
Both in readings of Millkin's own autobiography and friends of mine who would be in a position to know.
Yeah. Gosh, I hope this doesn't put a target on your back, my friend.
Well, we shall see.
Indeed. Okay. To continue on, by 1958, they were in New Jersey, sniffing out an SS major running a bar. He'd been a camp guard at Treblinka, got his papers forged through Operation Paperclip. The 12 got him drunk, had a priest read him his last rites, and he was deported through an Air Force safe house in Italy, meaning he was never seen again.
One of the 12, his code name was Tony Del Vecchio. His real name was unknown. was a former hitman for Meyer Lansky. He said the group's motto was no courtroom, no mercy, no witnesses. Hoover loved them because they got results without paperwork. It didn't matter what the target was: pedophile judges in Nebraska, machine politicians in Pittsburgh being paid off to look the other way on drugs, deviants and political extremists of all kinds who needed to be stopped. The men that Hoover's deputy and possible partner Clyde Tolson called the Apostles of Judgment got the job done.
And by the 1960s, the Cold War made things murkier. The 12 pivoted. They weren't just hunting fascists anymore. They were tearing apart Soviet spy rings. Millkin, he wasn't the monster, though. His beloved wife, Maria, said he used to weep after some missions and said, I kill for a country that doesn't want to know what I do. A true patriot in some senses. Millkin hid in the shadows, quietly acting both under orders and sometimes by his own judgment. The most famous unsanctioned mission took place in 1959. Millkin was going after a shady character codenamed John Card Sharp. The name was apt. The gentleman was trying to pay off a $50,000 gambling debt by smuggling diamonds and drugs in the coffins of dead soldiers. Millkin got paid twice for the same job, once by the FBI and once by the loan shark named Frank Santos, with connections to both organized crimes and the Louisiana political machine.
It's really amazing the sort of things these men got involved in. Another famous incident took place in Baltimore in 1961. A professor at Johns Hopkins is mailing code hidden in chess problems to Prague. He has family behind the Iron Curtain and may be a Czech spy. The 12 plant a story in the papers that he's a communist and also a homosexual. He commits suicide 2 weeks later. Effective, brutal, and hidden. Millkin, through his front job as a Brooklyn car salesman, found out the make and model of every car driven by Russian diplomats and anyone working in the Eastern Bloc embassies in Washington or the United Nations missions in New York. But the most famous mission of the unknowns is yet to come. Now let's go forward a couple of years. We take you to 1964 in Mississippi. Hot, thick with tension. A state where the Klan didn't wear hoods to hide, but police uniforms to protect. On June 21st, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, civil rights workers engaged in voter registration, vanished after being arrested and released by local police with Klan connections near Philadelphia, Mississippi. The FBI knows the locals aren't talking because some of the killers are the locals. Cops by day, robe-wearing Klansmen by night. J. Edgar Hoover was never a friend of the civil rights movement, but even he knew this disappearance, this blatant execution of 3 innocent young men could tear the country apart.
It doesn't really sound like a real patriot in that sense, does it?
No.
So what did Hoover do when the usual channels failed? When informants dried up and every witness got real quiet? He made a deal with the devil. According to Eric Denshall's Wise Guys and the White House, Hoover went off book quietly, discreetly. He authorized contact with the Colombo crime family.
Yes, that Colombo family. The Brooklyn numbers runners, the champions of extortion, the men who ran garbage routes and dumped bodies in barrels. But these weren't the button men in pinstripe suits. These were fixers, enforcers.
One in particular, feared assassin Gregory Scarpa, was flown down not for a hit, but to find a grave. Because when your enemies don't fear you, you find someone they do fear. Scarpa and his crew posed as union reps. Within days, they had eyes on everyone: bartenders, mechanics, gas station attendants, Klan sympathizers with gambling debts. Yeah, the whole run. One man talked, not to the FBI, to Gregory, in exchange for $500, a pack of Pall Malls, and a promise to keep his cousin off the hook for skimming from a vending machine racket. That tip led to the dam. June 23rd, 2 days later, the bodies of the three young men were found buried in an earthen dam. James Chaney had been beaten to the point of disfigurement. Justice didn't come easy or fast, but it started with a whisper, not in a courtroom, but in a smoke-filled kitchen behind a Mississippi bar where a New York mobster tapped the table and said, "You want your family safe? Tell me where the boys are."
Of course, Uber denied everything, but years later, internal memos surfaced. A list of code names, a plane chartered to a fake gambling union, a tax-free payment of $40,000 in cash to a post office box in Orlando, a quiet thank you sent to a New Jersey address with no mailbox.
Yeah, this wasn't the only time the mob got used to get things done, but it might be the most tragic because it proved what so many feared. Sometimes, to find the truth in America, you needed criminals to touch the ones with badges. James Chaney was only 21. Goodman and Schwerner were barely older. The mob didn't care about their cause, but they respected death, and they hated the Klan. We don't glorify the guys here, that is for sure. But sometimes in a crooked world, even a crooked man can lean the right way just for a moment. Before we go any further, let's set something straight. The case wasn't cracked just by mob fists or G-men flying in from D.C. It was cracked because good men, men of conscience, stood up and paid a price.
One of those hidden men was Dr. James Edgeways, an African American Baptist elder in Meridian, Mississippi. Not a household name, but he should be. Dr. Edgeways certainly wasn't wealthy. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't connected to Hoover, mainstream civil rights leaders, or the press. When the FBI offered $25,000 for information on the whereabouts of the three missing civil rights workers at the request of President Johnson, Dr. Edgeways did something no one expected. He mortgaged his own home, took out a loan of $10,000 in 1964 money that was his life savings, and added it personally to the reward.
Not because he was trying to make headlines, not because he wanted favor, but because he wanted those boys found. He once said in a sermon, quote, "If we wait for justice to walk through the front door, our children will be grown and gone. Sometimes we have to buy the key to the back." His contribution turned heads quietly behind closed doors. FBI agents admitted it brought in more tips in a week than all their raids combined.
An amazing story. Even the mobsters, according to one source, had a respect for him and were shaken by Edgway's sacrifice. Gregory Scarpa reportedly muttered, "I break legs. That man broke his future for something he believed in. He's the real muscle." Edgeways was threatened for it. A cross was burned on his lawn. His phone was tapped. His daughter had to be pulled out of school for her safety, but he never took the money back. He never apologized. And when the bodies were found, Dr. Edgeways cried openly at the press conference, not for victory, but for the brutal price that had to be paid.
We talk a lot on this podcast about the hidden hands, the quiet war behind the curtain. But let's not forget, sometimes the strongest resistance doesn't come from the shadows. Sometimes it may even come from a pulpit, from a man signing his house over to justice.
By 1965, the 12 were ghosts. Vietnam was stealing the world's attention, and Hoover, paranoid as always, was in mortal combat with the CIA. But tragically, in 1965, the monsters fought back.
California, that's where this chapter begins. Specifically, a desert adjacent neighborhood in Los Angeles, where a gang called Hate Incorporated, no wonderful name, was making headlines for, quote, community outreach and making under the table deals for military surplus supplies and armaments. Millkin, now a phantom working off book, gets wind of something worse. Guns being funneled into paramilitary compounds, real organized hate. Former Klansmen, biker gangs, Nazi enthusiasts, and disgruntled veterans all in the same clubhouse. He didn't ask permission. He followed the trail alone. That was his mistake.
Unbeknownst to him, parts of the CIA and other agencies had changed. This wasn't the company of World War II or even early Cold War containment. Some operatives, called them rogue, called them spooked, called them corrupt, believed Millkin knew too much.
June the 4th, 1965. Witnesses say Millkin left a diner in San Bernardino. He never made it to his safe house. Instead, a van registered to a fake charity drove east, all the way to Queens, New York.
And here's where it gets cruel. He had been kidnapped. He wasn't killed. That would have been too merciful. For over a year, he was kept in a locked ward of the now demolished VA hospital in Queens, New York, not listed under his own name. His wife was told he had had a stroke.
They tried to break him with insulin coma therapy, one of the most barbaric, quote, treatments ever designed. Forcing hypoglycemic shock is what that does. They tried electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, more than 20 documented sessions, which was kind of stupid because ECT often causes memory loss. So they were kind of defeating their own goods, but whatever. It wasn't pleasant because they didn't give him the anesthesia that usually goes along with ECT. There were also rumors he was given LSD, acid. His nerves burned with every jolt of electricity, his mind fogged with confusion, but somewhere in that decimated soul, he remembered. The room was cold, too clean. Two men stood over him, one CIA, a mid-level man named Giles Fenton, Yale ring, black gloves. The other, a psychiatrist on loan from MK Ultra. She wore pearls. Her voice was kind. Her name was Donna. She had been a Radcliffe graduate and the mistress of the King of Laos. Her words were poison.
Michael, she said, we just want to know what you were doing in California. Who sent you? Millkin blinked. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. but his eyes tracked them, and that terrified them.
because that meant he was in there watching, recording like a camera in a vault. They tried familiar tricks, photos of old teammates, a wiretap of his daughter's voice, even whispered promises of reinstatement. Quote, "We can make you a colonel, just cooperate." Nothing worked, not pressure or promises.
One night, he claimed Donna even attempted to seduce him, but Millkin wouldn't break, not because he was strong, but because he was angry. You see, Millkin knew where the bodies were buried. He had buried half of them. The other half were still calling Washington for their Christmas cards. So they tried again, this time with sodium amytal, the so called truth serum. A needle slid into his arm, as he said, like a serpent's fang. But Millkin had been well trained. He recited nursery rhymes, sang show tunes, but gave up nothing.
Yeah, dangerous drugs, not as therapy, but as interrogation. The way MK Ultra worked on people, they thought were spies. Only Millkin was their own. It might have ended that way, but a nurse on staff told her FBI agent cousin, who contacted Helen Gandy, Hoover's secretary and unofficial enforcer. She whispered in the ear of her boss, and Milliken was brought home damaged, but still functional. In gratitude for his loyalty, the FBI paid off his mortgage and sent his daughter to medical school.
One doctor, unknown, asked too many questions. There's no proof, but the gossip is that he died in a Vegas brothel. No investigation.
The squad's last mission took place in 1970. Milliken was sent to Ohio to see why the National Guard had fired live ammo at Kent State protesters. He couldn't prove anything, but suspected that Ohio politicians seeking to blame Governor James Rhodes had substituted real ammo for the rubber bullets the guardsmen were supposed to fire. The details of this and Milliken's 20-year career are written in his biography, The Squad. Why does this matter? Well, because when the guardians of justice become the architects of torment, history gets rewritten in the ink of silence.
And Michael Millkin is a name that should never be silent. A man who was built to stop nightmares, almost undone by the very people he once served. My friends, these sort of things happen all too often. We need to remember that we sometimes walk a dangerous tightrope in this world, to keep our eyes open and try to look for the truth beyond the headlines. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please leave us a like and a comment. Many more interesting topics coming. I think we'll have some very nice stuff coming up, both in this site and our sister site, History Twists. And I really enjoy doing this podcast, and I hope you enjoy it also.
Before I close out here, just want to make a comment here that when you break all the laws and you use people who like to break the laws, who feel that they are either above the law or at least that they're doing good by breaking the laws, it's not right. It simply is not right. One continuous circle of wrong and heinous crimes built on another group of heinous crimes. Not good stuff.
You're quite correct.
I too hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that hope you have a great day. And as Dr. Deneen said, keep your eyes open, ask questions, stay vigilant. Don't accept doing wrong in the guise of doing right, it isn't worth it. For now, we'll leave you. Come back soon. Bye bye.
So long, everybody.